Hello and welcome back to World 360. What does Israel's retaliation against Iran mean for the Middle East? Could elections in the Pacific island nation of Solomon Islands decide the country's future ties with China? And why has China sanctioned two US defense firms? We answer this and more in today's episode. So first up, the Middle East. As you know, tensions in this region have been further aggravated after Israel reportedly conducted an airstrike near an airbase in the Isfahan province in central Iran. On Friday morning, Iran's state media reported its air defense had been activated in several provinces after an explosion in this province. Following the sound of an explosion in Tabriz near an area called Wadi-e-Rahmat in northwestern Iran, Tabriz air defense fired upon a suspicious object, said Iran's state media. Now, air defenses intercepted 3 drones, an Iranian official had also said. Flights to Tehran, Isfahan and Shiraz were immediately suspended. And meanwhile, some unnamed US officials confirmed to various American media outlets that Israeli missiles did indeed hit a site in Iran. According to a CNN report, Israeli officials assured Washington that Iran's nuclear facilities would not be targeted. And this was confirmed by the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, which comes under the UN. And they said there has been no damage to Iran's nuclear sites. The IAEA's chief, meanwhile, called for extreme restraint from everybody and reiterated that nuclear facilities should never be a target in military conflicts. Now, Israel's attack on Friday was seen as a response to the Iranian regime's massive drone and missile attack days prior, which was largely intercepted by Israeli air defense systems. Now, Iran said it carried out the attack as retaliation for a suspected Israeli attack on its Iranian consulate in Syria on 1st April. What happened on Friday morning was definitely a tit-for-tat attack by Israel against Iran. Some experts have called Israel's strikes de-escalatory and restrained compared to the 300-odd drones and missiles launched by Iran last week. But no matter how big or small, Israel's retaliation is still being viewed as a dangerous escalation, a gambit even, that threatens to push the already volatile region into a wider conflict. Let's not forget that Israel is already fighting Hamas, an Iran-backed militant group in Gaza. It's also important to remember that for years, Iran and Israel have had hostilities mostly carried out via proxy wars in Syria, Lebanon, and even Iraq. But this is the first time in decades that the two regional foes have launched direct attacks on one another. What Iran will do next is unclear, but let's recall what Iran's president said before Friday's attack. He had in fact warned Israel that Iran would deliver a severe response to any attack on its soil. Just hours before Israel's attack on Iran on Friday, Iran's foreign minister was in New York to attend a UN Security Council meeting to debate the situation in the Middle East and also vote on a resolution recommending that Palestine become a full UN member state. During the UNSC meeting, the US vetoed the resolution of the full UN membership of Palestine. Of the 15 UNSC members, 12 voted in favor of this resolution, while the UK and Switzerland abstained. Russia and China, meanwhile, threw their support behind Palestine. Before Israel's attack on Iran, the British and German foreign ministers arrived in Israel, not just in a show of solidarity for Israel, but also as part of diplomatic efforts to prevent the conflict from escalating with Iran. However, as the Jerusalem Post put it, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the UK and German foreign ministers, "Thanks, but we'll make our own decisions." Meanwhile, G7 leaders are mulling over whether to slap new sanctions on Iran after its attack on Israel last Saturday. And Israel is keen for actions against Iran's Revolutionary Guards and its missile project. For the Americans, however, US President Joe Biden has made it clear that the US will not take part in a counter-offensive against Iran. That said, Deputy US Ambassador to the UN, Robert Wood, said, "Let me be clear. If Iran or its proxies take action against United States or further action against Israel, Iran will be held responsible." The US has also been in close touch with key Middle Eastern players such as Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan to avoid the situation spilling into an all-out regional war. For our second topic, we're looking at why China has sanctioned 2 US defense firms which have supplied arms to Taiwan. The continued US arms sales to China's Taiwan region seriously violate the One China principle and the provisions of the Three China-US joint communiques, said the Chinese Foreign Ministry in a statement. So let's look at what these two US firms are that got sanctions from China. The first is General Atomics Aeronautical Systems, and the second is a military vehicle maker, General Dynamics Land Systems. Now, General Atomics Aeronautical Systems is a military contractor and a subsidiary of General Atomics, which you've probably heard of, and it designs and manufactures drones and radar systems for the US military and commercial applications worldwide. Now, earlier in March, this company secured a landmark contract for MQNB Sky Guardian drones for Taiwan. It was awarded a $250 million contract from Taiwan for UAV procurement or drone procurement amid growing regional tensions with China. The deal was facilitated by the US Air Force. Now, the agreement also includes procurement by Taiwan for MQ-9B drones, 2 certifiable ground control stations, and associated spares and support equipment. Due to this sale, the Chinese government slapped sanctions on this American company, as obviously China has time and time again said it views Taiwan as part of its own territory, which may be recovered by force if necessary. These Chinese sanctions entail freezing the assets of General Atomics and Aeronautical Systems and General Dynamics Land Systems held within China. Currently, General Dynamics operates about 6 Gulfstream and jet aviation services operations in China. Now, the US has retaliated by blacklisting 4 Chinese companies for supplying AI chips to the Chinese military. Days after China sanctioned these 2 US defense firms, the US Commerce Department added these 4 Chinese companies to its entity list for allegedly acquiring and attempting to acquire US items in support of China's military modernization efforts. These Chinese companies include Linkzol Technology, Xi'an-like Innovative Information Technology, Beijing Anwise Technology, and Siton Holy. The US Commerce Department also added another Chinese company called Jiangxi Xinjiu Enterprise to the list for allegedly supporting Russia's military through the procurement, development, and proliferation of Russian drones. Another Chinese company, Shenzhen Jiasibo Technology, was added for being part of a network procuring aerospace components, including drone applications, for an Iranian aircraft company. Now, it's interesting to see these developments, given US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen just recently traveled to China in a bid to strengthen dialogue and communication between Beijing and Washington, as well as trying to avoid miscalculation between the two countries and promote some form of cooperation between them. This trip had sparked some optimism. In fact, China's government mouthpiece, Global Times, issued an editorial saying, "The optimism to some extent is a reflection of the reality of US-China relations compared to the same time last year. There has been no major disruptive event in bilateral relations this year, and exchanges between the two countries in various fields show signs of recovery." But some US lawmakers only expect the sanctions game between the US and China to continue, even though it doesn't seem to change Beijing's behavior to Washington's liking. In an opinion titled "The Sanctions Against China Will Continue Until Morale Improves," US Republican Senator Rand Paul talks about the futility of sanctions in American foreign policy. He says, "The history of sanctions is a history of failure. The US sanctioned Cuba for over 6 decades and the Communist Party still rules the land. Sanctions did not alter the behavior of adversarial regimes in Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. The one thing sanctions have achieved is helping China build the alliances it might need to effectively challenge the United States." For our last topic, we're looking at the importance of an election in an important Pacific Island country and how the outcome of these polls could decide the island country's ties with China. I'm talking about the Solomon Islands. Now, if you watch the show, you know that we've covered how different Pacific Island states have different relations with either China or the US, two countries which have been competing for influence and power in the Indo-Pacific region. The Solomon Islands, under the leadership of Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare, has leaned closer to China over the last couple of years. In fact, in April 2022, Solomon Islands, under this leadership, signed a security agreement with China. At the time, the US raised concerns of the broad nature of this agreement, which may enable China to deploy its military forces in the country. Australia, another major player in the Indo-Pacific, had also taken note of this. In July 2023, China and Solomon Islands signed a policing agreement as part of an upgrade of ties. It was among 9 deals signed after Solomon Islands Prime Minister met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang in Beijing that time, underlying his nation's foreign policy shift vis-a-vis China. Now, with the parliamentary election around the corner, incumbent Prime Minister Sogavare may face a political challenge. Let's not forget that in 2019, soon after becoming Prime Minister, he switched his country's diplomatic ties from Taiwan to China. The opposition, meanwhile, have criticized the 2022 security pact with China and the police pact that was signed in the following year. For example, Peter Kenny-Lorea's United Party has said it will scrap the security pact with China and create more infrastructure partnerships with Western countries should the incumbent ruling party fail to win the election. Now, vote counting in Solomon Islands begins on Thursday, but results are likely to come in only next week. We, of course, will be tracking this very closely at ThePrint. So thanks so much for watching. This is Pia Krishnankutty for ThePrint.